The Florida Gators basketball team are the reigning defending national champions. What does their path to going back-to-back look like?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Joining me today is Neil Blackmon from Saturday Down South and Florida Basketball Hour podcast. Neil, before we even talk about what's actually happened so far, going into this offseason after, the Florida Gators win the national championship, Gator boys stay hot. There we go. Before any of that actually happened, going into the offseason, we knew that Florida would lose Walter Clayton Jr., Alijah Martin, and Will Richard. Since then, Alex Condon and Ruben Chinyelu have both declared for the draft. And, you're free to share how you feel about it. Personally, I kind of expect them both back at this point. I thought Thomas Houck would declare, but still come back. And he has said that he's just not even going to do the declaring part. He's just going to come right back. We all thought Denzel Aberdeen would be a major contributor next year, but that's gone. So while we knew that there'd be a lot of changes, there have been different changes than I think we expected. And that's just... it's been a roller coaster here. Going into the offseason, and we'll talk about Xavier Lee in a minute, but going into the offseason, what did you think the approach would be for the Florida Gators?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do think, and I know that the Aberdeen thing took everybody by surprise. So I think going in, and that means in the building. So I think going into the offseason, the thought was you've got to get a point guard. Then you're not going to replace Walter Clayton Jr. And you on Locked On Sports, everybody that has a show and a platform we're going to have to keep saying that till we're blue in the face and nobody's going to listen to us anyway. Yep. And so like Xavier Lee's almost in an impossible spot, but they knew they were going to have to get a premier type player at the point guard position. And then I think the thought was always that they'd have to get a second guard who was capable of being an impact player. It was just kind of what role was it going to be? And that's why I think, for example, they came out of the gate and you heard some connection to like Bryce Lindsey. And that might have made a lot of sense in a world where they had Denzel Aberdeen back. And so I do think that was kind of always the formula on Chinyelu and Condon. Yeah, I think the operational assumption was that both are likely to be back. Obviously, Alex could kill it at the combine, and that could change. But it seems not terribly likely that he is gone for a long time. I think it'll be a harder decision than a lot of people are saying right now, because I think he's going to be very close to being a first-round type projection. But, I think that was the point, was they always were going to add two guards, and then it was going to be wait and see on the front court.
Yeah, with Condon, I'm torn on it because I can buy into why Condon should be drafted pretty early. I can buy into it, but there's just some things that I look at and I think he's just not ready for that. I look at that Auburn game, the second one, which if there's any Auburn fans watching, the second time Florida beat Auburn, that second one, Johni Broome came out. And the first possession, back down Condon, scored on him and let him know about it the whole way down court. Condon tried answering, and Johni Broome shut it down and then let him know about it the whole way. And there's moments like that where I look at the physicality of some of these bigs and the mental aspect of just being able to go back and forth with someone and be able to answer. I don't know if Alex Condon is ready for that aspect of the NBA. And when I think of, and I'm more of a football guy, so maybe this is just how I'm thinking of things. But when I look at the draft and when I try to put myself in a front office position and try to use that mindset to think, well, can I draft this guy and can he be ready for me? I look at Condon in the biggest games, and he made some good plays in those big games, but through most of the tournament, my opinion is that I think he wasn't playing as well as we saw him play during the regular season. And maybe that was, the ankle still bothering him going, these every other day having a game instead of having 4 days off in between like you have at some point in the season. But it just felt like when watching that, I wasn't looking at someone that is ready to come into the NBA and contribute early on.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had told me that Florida was going to go to the Final Four and that Alex Condon was going to play, one good game on the way to the Final Four, I would have been pretty surprised that Florida made the Final Four. So I think the fact that Florida was able to do that when really the best Alex played, in the postseason was probably the SEC championship game against Tennessee. That aspect of Florida being that good surprised me. It also probably hurt Condon from a draft standpoint. I mean, the reality is there are a lot of eyeballs. And so like the way that NBA scouting works, and this, I don't think a lot of people really realize. They see 20 scouts at an NBA game or at a college game with Jeremiah Fears and Walter Clayton Jr. And they say, look at all the scouts that are here to see Jeremiah Fears and Walter Clayton Jr. It's like, no, they're not there to see Walter Clayton Jr. and Jeremiah. They know what those guys are. They're there to see like Alex Condon and Tommy Houck and Jalen Moore, like there was a reason there were 20 scouts in the building when Oklahoma came, and it wasn't just Jeremiah Fears. So like you take that to an NCAA tournament game and multiply it by 100, right? And yeah, I mean, there were some loud moments where Condon's flaws were very much on display. That said, I mean, the NBA draft is upside more than any other draft. So when they're also going to look at what he has been able to do as somebody that hasn't played basketball a lot, they're going to look at games like the SEC championship game where he took over in the second half. They're going to look at games like that game at Alabama he was ridiculous. And so that's why I said I think it'll be close. But, for as much as we lament NIL, the 20th pick in the draft is that slot value is where it probably gets out of Florida's price range. But anything lower than that, 21, 22, down to 30, I think Florida makes it, they certainly can incentivize him returning.
Yeah, that was kind of after the declaration. That was kind of that was the point I marked, the 20th pick spot of, I think if it's later than that, Florida has a chance to.
Yeah.
I mean, you can also, if you're Florida, you can say like, hey, like you can come back, make this same money, come back, genuinely improve your game with another year of just development here, win another championship potentially, and improve your stock even more and get more national games. I mean, after winning the national championship, you're going to be on TV probably a lot next year. And this is going to be a big selling point to get yourself in front of these eyes, in front of these scouts, and improve there. We are going to talk about some of the guard play, and we know that Todd Golden is incredibly analytically driven. Maybe one of the most, or maybe the most analytically driven coach in college basketball right now. So we're going to talk about that in just a second when we get back with Locked On Gators. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It is electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Some of the fans here are still in the playoffs. Saying New York Knicks fan here, so Knicks tape, baby. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. 60%. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College to get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever the podcast and on YouTube. Neil Blackmon joining me from Saturday Down South and Florida Basketball Hour podcast. And I've talked about obviously, again, we know Todd Golden, incredibly analytically driven. That's his shtick. That's his whole thing is analytics. And I have talked about this offseason for Florida as essentially trying to moneyball it, and not moneyball in the sense of just analytics, but for I will also say this: Moneyball, one of my favorite movies. I don't care how accurate it is. I like analytics. I'm a nerd. That's fine. But Moneyball started with Jason Giambi is gone. We lost all these guys from the A's. How do we replace them? Well, this guy could be the next Giambi. And it went, well, no, that guy's not going to be the next Giambi, because if he was the next Giambi, we wouldn't be able to afford him. We're not trying to replace Jason Giambi with a guy. We're trying to replace Jason Giambi in the aggregate. And I feel like Florida is trying to do that with Walter Clayton Jr. You know, you mentioned it earlier. You're not going to replace Walter Clayton Jr. I mean, Walter Clayton Jr. was best guard in the country this past season overall. Yeah. Like he was the best guard in the country. You're not going to replace that with one guy. Even Xavier Lee, who I love, I think he's great, but Xavier Lee was also in college basketball last year, and Walter Clayton Jr. was better. They're also just different players.
Yeah.
So I don't think that you're going to be able to replace Walter Clayton Jr. with one guy. You have to replace him or you have to replace him in the aggregate. Is it fair to say that Florida's trying to moneyball college basketball truly this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they certainly built a team that won like that. You know, if you have Premier League listeners, a comparison I've made on our podcast is like Arsenal under Arsene Wenger. It was the same concept. They weren't able to spend as much as Manchester City or Manchester United or some of those clubs, Chelsea. So they found ways that they could replace productivity, economically. And I think Florida's certainly going to try to do that. The good news is Florida has good NIL. So that's why another reason I liked Arsenal. They have money to spend, right? Like I think you would say Florida's probably top 15, certainly top 20 in the country and where they are in NIL and basketball. So there is financial flexibility, but yeah, I mean, they have to replace that production. They're also going to have to figure out, whoever they bring in is going to need to guard. I think with the losses of Will Richard and Alijah Martin, you're really losing two outstanding defenders. Now, Richard is the unique one because he sort of blossomed into that as a senior. Remember, he went to get NBA feedback and pretty universally was told, you better play defense better. And to Will's credit, that's exactly what he did, right? Obviously, and then makes 3 immense plays down the stretch in the national championship game of all places. But Alijah Martin changed the entire competitive culture. And it's really 3 defenders now that Aberdeen has transferred because, Zell, for all his flaws offensively, really got after it on the other end. So I think you've brought in Xavier Lee. Now I think the question is who comes in and guards. I think CJ Ingram answers one of those questions to the extent that he's functional enough offensively to play 9-10 minutes a game. But yeah, I mean, they've got to hope they get Condon back for that piece, especially because it'll be a different kind of defense this year where maybe they aren't as good in the backcourt defensively, but they're so good in the front court that they offset that. But if I were to put like the over under on Florida's defense at, over under 10th in the country, like they entered the NCAA tournament this year, I don't think it's going to be a top 10 defense. So to your point, you better find a way to replace that offensive productivity. And yeah, I mean, they're going to have to kind of attack it from a Moneyball angle with their last 2 to 3 spots here they've got.
Yeah. And I think about this team. I feel like they're going to be offensively. I feel like they might be even a bit stylistically different, because you're not going to have that Walter Clayton Jr. there. So with the addition of Xavier Lee and AJ Brown as well at this point, and at the time of recording this, On3 has said that USC guard Desmond Cloud is trending Florida, but I don't even think by the time this comes out on Tuesday, we'll have that answer. Officially, I don't think we'll have that answer, but we can include him in the hypothetical here. But even with Xavier Lee, how do you view this maybe changing to more of a drive and dish style? Is that what we might be seeing here from Florida? Because again, you don't have just the pure, for lack of a better term, pure bucket getter that Walter Clayton Jr. is.
Well, I think Lee can be a bucket getter. He's got a big bag. I will say that. But I think to your point, it's a different kind of player. Xavier probably needs the ball to create a little bit more, where Walt, you could play him off the ball and he was fine. You could play him on the ball. He obviously was great in the pick and roll. So I think just kind of the multiple ways that Walt could play versus Xavier, at least to this point in his career, has been pretty isolation heavy. I think that will look a little different. And I do think Florida's answer, might just be to be overwhelmingly physical, especially if Kahn is back. It could look a little bit more like Texas A&M, St. John's type offensive team, where it's a lot of get the ball to the basket. We're going to get second opportunities and we will eventually make shots. The wild cards to that kind of analysis, so that it doesn't sound terribly lazy, or that Alex Lloyd is absolutely a bucket. He's a top 50 player, just lit the Jordan Brand Classic on fire a couple of weeks ago. He's going to play as long as he can handle sort of the physicality. He's going to help Florida offensively a lot. And it'll be interesting to see how much A.J. Brown plays. And I think a lot of that will kind of depend on Urban Klavzar, to be quite honest. And if Urban is ready physically to take a jump, then I think it'll be more Urban. But Florida will need one of those two guys on the floor at times just to be able to space, right? Because you've got to have another shooter. And we've heard about Desmond Claude from USC and him maybe coming in. And I like Desmond a lot. My co-host Eric Fawcett likes him less than me. And I think it's because he's a guard that doesn't shoot, right? He doesn't shoot threes. So he is great at getting to the free throw line. He is great at attacking the basket. And he's a good passer when he drives and kicks, to your point. But I think with a guy like Desmond, the question kind of becomes, who do you got that can shoot? Because, if you have guys that are drive heavy and that don't shoot the three, it can make your spacing a little wonky at times and make you pretty easy to defend, which we saw snake bite a team like St. John's in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, that's one of the things where, and look, I can criticize things, you can criticize things, anybody can criticize things. At the end of the day, Todd Golden is the reigning defending national championship coach. He's going to build.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah. He's earned the. I talk about this with Gerald Chapman on football, where I'm like, even if I don't view a player highly, Gerald Chapman has earned the I'm going to shut the hell up about my opinion, because he knows more than I do. And I think Todd Golden has earned that. But I look at the potential addition of Desmond Claude. I look at Xavier Lee, and both of them are pretty drive heavy, ball dominant people, I think. And AJ Brown, I think, can be your shooter out there. But I do look at how those two in Lee and Claude would develop together and how they mesh together if they're on the court at the same time. Just because, again, both of them are like, you can drive and dish. I think Lee's a better shooter, but like you mentioned, hasn't played a ton off ball to this point in his career. And part of that's because he was with Princeton.
Yeah.
But
I think Claude can play off the ball more so than Lee. And I think so, like Eric Musselman's offense, using offense in air quotes, really, with an Eric Musselman team. But it's so much just space the floor, set a screen, and let a guard attack. And I think Desmond Claude, I don't think he has to be as ball dominant as maybe the video at USC indicates. I think he just needs a better system for what he's good at. And that's a debate Eric Fawcett and I have been having is, well, I don't know, man. Eric Musselman has a way of making players seem inefficient, and then they get out of his system and they look a lot better. And so that would be kind of an interesting one to me. But yeah, I mean, AJ Brown or Klavzar would be preferable, because he guards. And we saw him, play hard and really he's quick, so he can keep people in front of him. And I think that will be the big adjustment for AJ Brown. And so like they would love to get to a point where Klavzar is capable of that. And then Zay Brown is the guy we can't forget in that mix. And that's a guy that Carlin Hartman said he thought would be an all SEC player. I talked to him bunch of times last year, but we had him on the show and he said, hey, when all is said and done, Zay Brown will be all SEC. So if he takes a leap as a sophomore, then you've got, an answer on the wing too, that maybe is a little more Will Richardy, but we will see.
Yeah. And we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about the coaching staff changes that we saw this offseason, because, when you're great, you're going to lose guys. When you're great, coaches are going to leave, coaches are going to go, and they're going to get hired elsewhere. And that's what happened with Florida. So we'll talk about it in just a minute with Locked On Gators. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Also important that today is Tuesday, and every Tuesday during the MLB season, we got a thing called Dinger Tuesday, which means that you get a 50% profit boost for home runs on Tuesdays. It's beautiful. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever the podcast and on YouTube. To wrap up today's show, joining me, Neil Blackmon from Saturday Down South and Florida Basketball Hour. And like I said, we're going to talk about coaches in a minute. Before we get there, if I'm not mistaken, you guys tweeted, I'm not sure which one, so I'm just going to say you guys. I don't know who was tweeting at the time. But if I'm not mistaken, you guys tweeted out on, I believe it was Sunday, that the expectation is Ben Henshaw is likely going to stay in the NBA draft.
Yep.
And many people, talked about, oh, well, if he comes to college, Florida's front running there. So with Ben Henshaw likely staying in the NBA draft, we've talked a little bit about Desmond Claude. We've talked about adding Xavier Lee. We've talked about adding AJ Brown. What do you view as, in your opinion, what should be the next step for the Florida Gators in the transfer portal at this point with their final couple of spots?
Well, it'll be interesting. I think Desmond Claude should visit this week. And that is sourced. It's not, the point is it's not final. Like they haven't, there's no certainty on that, but that would be what they hope happens. Okay. If they can work it out, and they're not like worried about him not visiting at all, but they'd like to do that this week. We'll see. I think what's fascinating right now is like, there's probably a couple guys that they want to wait until after the NBA Combine and kind of see what they're doing. So it would be interesting if Claude came and then didn't commit. And then I think there'd be this panic that sets in on the fan base. And, I don't know if that would be Florida's staff waiting before they want to take his commitment, or if, it would be Claude being like, I'm just going through the process and then I'll commit. We'll see. I don't expect Desmond Claude to get an NBA G League Combine invite anyway. So he'll get feedback. That's great. They're going to tell him to play defense. But yeah, that would kind of be my time frame for things. With Ben Henshaw, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's possible he could change his mind. But everyone that I've spoken to says that he seems really locked in on staying in the draft.
Go ahead. Whatever. He doesn't want to win a national championship next year. That's fine. So the Florida Gators lost a couple of coaches. During the tournament, it was announced that they were going to lose them. And filled those roles pretty quickly afterward. And let's start with the internal hire first here. How has Jonathan Safir's role changed? And what does he now bring to a more active and more prominent coaching staff role?
So the funny thing with Saf is I don't think his role's going to change at all.
So just title, they're like,
he is the general manager of Florida basketball, along with Todd Golden. Carlin Hartman is getting involved in that this season. And I think that's important to shout out and get out there because, Carlin, one of the most well-respected coaches in the sport, head, assistant, whatever. But I think the last piece for him to becoming a head coach is get involved in some team building. So he's going to do some of that. But yeah, Safir will continue to be the general manager / co-general manager of Florida. He'll just be on the bench in an assistant's role. He was already on the bench. There are multiple games in the NCAA tournament where you'd see Jonathan Safir saying something to Todd Golden. And it was usually like the Texas Tech game's a great example. It was Todd's call, but it was him and Saf that discussed fouling. When they did to put a free throw shooter on the line, they did not want to foul Darian Williams, but they tried really hard to foul JT Toppin, and they did actually foul him. They just didn't call it. So that'll be his role. The other hire, Dave Klatsky, familiar to Florida fans, I think that as a Klatsky, obviously Alex played here. Brian was here. So family members, those are his cousins. But Dave, an interesting dude, a Wall Street investment guy that decided to coach basketball.
While still working on
if he wanted to run a hedge fund, he could run a hedge fund. He's the kind of guy who would be good at most anything. He just happens to be considered one of the most outstanding young, innovative minds in offense. And he'll take over Kevin Hovde's spot as the offensive coordinator. And I think that should be pretty seamless. They run stuff that's a little different than what Hovde ran, but who knows how much he ran at NYU he'll bring to the SEC, or if it'll kind of be, he'll learn on the fly what he can do in the league and what he can't. But excited about having Dave Klatsky on the staff. I think just another kind of smart hire that keeps Florida on the cutting edge as a coaching staff as well.
Yeah. Interesting that, the cities traded, Gainesville traded Hovde to New York City and Columbia, which I don't know how much anybody listening or watching cares about.
Tough job.
Yeah. And NYU's rival, academically at least.
That's right. Yeah.
So with trading with rivals, so kind of a double whammy there against NYU, I guess, losing Klatsky and then now coming in for Columbia. So losing there, but I am curious with the addition of Dave Klatsky, we're probably going to see again, like you mentioned, some stuff is going to change at least offensively.
Oh yeah.
For this Florida Gators team, how much does that add on to the already pretty significant roster change that it's like, hey, well, now we're also probably going to do some different things offensively. I don't know how much the defense is really going to change with all this going on.
Yeah, Todd runs the defense. So the defense is going to be what Todd does. They're going to limit 3-point opportunities and try to make you take tough twos. Yeah, that's a good question. It's a question that'll be a lot easier for me to answer after May 28th when I know whether Alex Connon is back. But I think they're going to play too big, assuming that Alex is back, which, again, I would lean more towards that than not. They're still going to have two bigs on the floor. And it's going to become even more important to do that, I think, if it is somebody like Desmond Claude, because they're going to have to get up more shots than opponents most nights. That was yet another remarkable thing about this NCAA tournament run was they got outshot by Texas A&M, UConn, and Houston and lived to tell the tale, right? So if you'd told me that was going to happen, I might have said, oh, they're going to lose.
Yep.
There were a lot of things in the national championship game where I was like, oh, Houston wins the national championship. Yeah. If you told me that would happen. But anyway, so I don't know how much Dave's going to change things, sort of the structure of what Florida wants to do. But I do think, they'll run some more NBA style sets and it'll look a little more modern. and that's fine as long as they can execute it. Certainly what Kevin Hovde was doing was working. They finished second in the country in offense. So pretty good coordinator.
Yeah. A little bit of talent. Little bit of talent there, a little bit of brain power there. But thank you so much, Neil. This was Neil Blackmon with Saturday Down South Florida Basketball. Neil, I want you to go ahead, shout out anywhere that you want people to find your work or anywhere they can find your work. And if you are a Florida Gators basketball fan or Florida Gators fan for anything, Neil's a great source to follow.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. And everybody, if you're listening to Locked On Gators, you're doing it right. But make sure you can follow our basketball Twitter at Florida BB Hour. My Twitter's at NW Blackmon, BLACKMON. And then most of my stuff's at Saturday Down South or the basketball stuff on the podcast, Florida Basketball, or in our patreon.com/Florida BB Hour. So appreciate you, Brandon. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. Thank you so much. I am Brandon Olsen. Find my work on New York Giants on SI. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. We will see you all next time.